So as is custom, we are, So we're doing our summer check-in on the progress of the 2010 Barolo, let's try that again, Brunello wines. Welcome back to Drinking It In. I am your host, Chris Casara. We are here to help you know more and drink better, and I have a 2010 Brunello wine, I have the spit cup, I have a decanter, and I have a glass. So we're gonna check in on this 2010 Brunello, but what we're gonna do this in stages and different scenarios and see how the wine is aging and see whether there's a big difference whether I just pop and pour in a glass, decant the bottle and have a glass, or see how it is tomorrow. So it should be a fun exercise. Generally get good feedback from you guys on the check-ins of some of these older wines. Oh man, sorry, now it gave me the chills. That was terrible. All right, cork's not in bad shape, that's good. So we're gonna pour a little bit in here to taste, and then we are going to decant the wine in here and taste that after that glass. So 2010 Brunello, 2010 in Italy was one of those legendary vintages. What's interesting is that given with global warming, there's a fair bit of sediment in here, so not too bad. Maybe you can kind of see that. Got the good light on it. A little sediment. I think I'm gonna wash that out. But 2010 was a great vintage. All the wines are really long lasting, whether it was Barolo or Brunello, Barbaresco, anything from France. So, I bought these wines upon release. They've been in my cellar or, in various storage locations for for about 10 years, right? Because let's call it 8 to 10 years, right? Because these things takes a little time for them to hit the market. But every summer, what I've been doing is checking in on a different bottle. I still have quite a bit of it, so as we go through and I drink one or two of these a year, it provides a neat experience on how the wines are evolving. And as I look at this wine, so first what we're gonna do is do a simple pop and pour taste, and then we'll have a little from the decanter. You do see that there is a bit of browning happening on this wine, right? So the wine is not as bright and plummy red as it was upon the initial release. So that is, it's a sign of the wine's age. These wines are still very big, still very aromatic. Those cherries are lots of cherries there. Very, you can tell they're drying up a little bit. Or if you had a cherry, right, and the cherry started drying up, this is what this smells like. I get a bit of earth, so more of fallen leaves. And I want to say, just something I usually get in Barolo wines is I'm getting a little essence of mint. All right, let's see what it tastes like. That minty menthol thing is there. That's interesting. I wasn't expecting that out of Brunello. I expect that out of Barolos. Tannins are still very, very strong. My mouth is drying out a little bit. There's a perfumey nature to this wine. Really, really pretty, actually. Not as powerful. It's big, but it's not as powerful as I recall the last couple of bottles that I've had from this, from this producer and this vintage. Like it is softening up, so that is interesting. I realized I didn't say which wine what we're drinking. So this is a 2010 San Filippo, 2010 Brunello di Montalcino Le Lucere. I guess single vineyard or you know, let's say you know, craft release, right? It's I'll put a little more information down in the description as to what that means, right? But you know, they do a base Brunello, and then they have the Le Lucere, which really is just about, you know, more I guess selective with the grapes that go into the wine. The wine's still going, so we're probably at least at 45 seconds to a minute, and I'm still tasting the wine. So this thing has just like initial reaction, the tannins and the fruit still have plenty of years left. I'd like to see a little more tartness or acid to this. Like it didn't bounce around my palate as much as I would like, but you know, let's see if it just needed if it needs some air. So we're going to try a little bit of the wine from the decanter. Again, I just popped and poured it. You saw it. Not very little time has elapsed, but you know, when you pour the wine into the decanter and you know, the oxygen and the agitation of the wine, it definitely loosens it up a bit. I think what I'm going to do in terms of for tomorrow is pour some of this back into the bottle. So we'll do a bit of a double decant, but I'll put the cork back in it, and then we'll do 2 more tastes tomorrow. One from the decanter that's been open for, you know, let's say about 20 hours between now and the next time, and one from, you know, that was put back into the bottle. We'll see if we see any differences, because that's what I'm really after. You know, because I think I've encouraged you guys to not rush in drinking your wines after you open them, and yeah, this is one of those fun experiments that hopefully will give you a sense for how to treat your wines once you open them. Not too different on the nose, although as I inhaled, I got more of an alcohol whiff to it. This wine definitely needs to relax, right? It needs some aeration. It needs time. So the moral of the story right now is don't pop and pour a 2010 Brunello. While it's not that it was bad, you can tell it needs to loosen up a little bit, and that just comes in time. So I'm getting more plum notes from the decanter. The mint note is not there. All right, let's see what it tastes like. The minty note is there on the palate. Not as strong though. It definitely blew off a little bit, even just that little agitation, a little time in the decanter. I get a little more fruit. It's not as perfumey. Well, I should give it another 30 seconds in the mouth as the perfume develops, but it's not as perfumey as that first sip. So that's pretty interesting. I would have expected that would have stayed with me. Finish is still nice and long. There's getting a little bit of a graphite note, which is kind of cool. And there's definitely some tingly notes back here. So like where on that initial glass, I didn't get any sort of acidic note. I'm getting that acidic punch to a little bit of acidic punch. So the tartness is there. Tannins are still present. I'm really curious about tomorrow whether we'll see the tannins be noticeably softer, because right now they're pretty strong. And not that we should suspect after 12 years that these wines would not have any tannins left, but they're stronger than I would have expected right now. That mentholy note. It's a pretty tasty wine. I have a feeling I'm gonna like it more tomorrow. I'll be back in a moment. Got a little nervous that was gonna fall over. So I'm back. It is about, so let's say, it's about 20 hours later. So these the decanter has been sitting out on the counter for 20 hours. I poured some of the wine back in the bottle, so I sort of double decanted it. That's been sitting out for 20 hours. Let's see what this wine tastes like today. I'm gonna go from the bottle first. Okay, so the nose is completely different than what it was after we popped and poured, or even after we decanted it a little bit. It's much sweeter. There's almost a, I'm gonna call it like a caramel vibe. Like a sweet burnt sugar with some cherries. With a little of that, you know, we open up a can of fresh paint, like that sort of, it's not quite chemical, but there's that sort of whiff that you get, and that's definitely coming up here. It's neat though, because it went from being like really somewhat earthy with a little bit of that, you know, dried fruit to almost like a, if I were tasting this blind, literally blind, because you can see that it's not a port, it almost veers in that direction of a dessert wine. Quite bitter. Creamy, 100% creamy. I'm not getting a ton of fruit. That toffee, caramelly type note is ever present. So this kind of went towards more of a sweet vibe, but I don't know. The finish is not, it's not like real pleasurable. There's a lot of bitterness. The tannins have definitely calmed down, right? My mouth is not as dry as it was like right out of the bottle, which makes sense. Like just oxygen, this relaxes. But but it lacks a lot of fruit. Okay, well, let's see what this decanted version brings us. It's not as, it has a different nose. This is wild. So this was very much like that caramel note was pronounced. It was the first thing that hit you. In this case, with the decanter, there's some sugar that came in, but it's not like it turned into caramel. There's a sweet, like dried cherries covered with some sugar. I'm getting an herb note here, sort of like a rosemary, something sharp. It's an interesting experiment. So there's a little bitterness. And the tannins are more present in this than in here, which makes less sense to me, although maybe the additional agitation going back in the bottle tamed that down. But coming out of the decanter, the wine is much more enjoyable. In the end, I gotta be honest, I am not loving this wine right now. I think I've got another bottle or two up in the wine cabinet. If I have a base version, I might do the same thing with the base version soon, just so that we've got like a real A/B comparison. In the end, the optimal way to enjoy this wine, if you have it, is to decant it and leave it on the counter for 20 hours. Don't decant it and pour it back in the bottle. It comes, somehow it became as bitter as like eating like the rind of a citrus fruit. This is the winner, at least. Yeah, not loving it. All right, well, they can't all be winners now, can they? I hope you guys have enjoyed this little experiment and it gets you thinking about what to do when you open a bottle of wine and maybe don't finish it. Or open a bottle of wine and don't even start it until the next day. You know, be strategic with your wines. 2010 Brunello check-in. Not a good check-in. Maybe it's just this wine. We'll see. Okay, so I wasn't planning on tasting this wine again after another 24 hours, as evidenced by my ridiculous attire. But I took a quick sip and it surprised me, so I figured let's just try it one more time. This is day 3 of this wine, and yesterday, if you remember, it was really, really bitter and borderline undrinkable. It got the thumbs down. The aromas are still the same. It's very dark, but it does have that dark, like dark blackberries with some caramel in it, which is cool. Except today, it's not bitter anymore. It's sweet. It has a lot of fruit. It almost tastes like a Napa Cabernet, like some of those big, bold Napa Cabernets. So on day 3, this wine gets a thumbs up. Day 2, no. So I don't know. I guess let it sit in a decanter for 48 hours before you drink it. That's what we learned. Thanks for joining.